Hello everyone. In this lecture, we are going to learn about constants and configuration files. During programming, in certain cases, we may want to protect our arrays for changing its size. So, we may specify an array length as a constant. And here we see an example. We have a class arrayExample5, and within this class, we have a main method. And here's how we can specify an array length as a constant. Final int array length is equal to 5. And then we define our array with this constant. And then in this particular example, we are assigning values to this double array. And we are going to look at the details of this program, this simple program. Now here's the output. We basically assign 0.0 to this double array to each of its elements. Now, constants are variables that are declared and initialized once and are not expected to change throughout the program execution. The way we specify constants is by using the keyword final before the type of the constant that we are trying to create. And in this case, final int array length is equal to 5. And then we define our array using this constant. Now, why do we do that? Well, in certain cases, we may want to protect our array size for modification. That's why we may specify it as a constant. When you create a constant and you initialize it, the value cannot be changed, and that's why it's called a constant. Let's look at the naming convention of constants. The naming convention of constants is different from the common naming convention of object-oriented paradigm. Capital letters are used to declare a constant. Snake naming convention is used as opposed to camel case naming convention. And remember that camel case naming convention is the common naming convention of object-oriented paradigm. Now, constants are styled similarly in most programming languages. So you will see constants that are using the same naming convention in C, C++, Java, and in some other programming languages as well. So when you see a variable in capital letters, you can assume that that's specified as a constant. In industry, in software projects, we actually use different type of files. Now, each of these files will serve a special purpose, and we do have like source code files, which includes the source code for our project. We may have media files, which includes the media files that we use in our software project. We may have database files or data files or data type files, and we may have configuration files. Now, configuration files are special purpose files that store certain configuration parameters. And these parameters may be used throughout the application. As they are stored in configuration files, they are easy to find and modify based on developing needs. Using configuration files helps with maintenance of software application. In Java, configuration files may be designed with a class consisting of only attributes. Now, commonly, these classes only contain attributes to store configuration parameters. That's why they are called configuration files. Basically, configuration files have configuration parameters. In addition, depending on the need of these attributes, they are commonly set as static and final. Now let's see an example for a configuration file. Now suppose that we are developing software for a company, and the software we are developing is employee management software. Within this software, we have a module for payroll management, and we are going to calculate various pay grades for different employees, and we may need tax rates for different kind of cases. Now, the tax rates are based on the tax regulations, right? So we may want to put these rates into a separate configuration file. So this may be like a data file that contains the tax rates for our application. Now, here's how we can create this tax rate file. Public class tax rates, right? The Java consists of classes, and here are the tax rates for different brackets. Now we specify them as public because we are going to use this class from other classes, and then we make them as static because let's say we are going to use them for many calculations, so we want to save some reload time. And then we made them as final because we don't want them to be changed from outside the class. We want to declare it first, and then we want it to be used throughout the application without the worry of their modification. Now, when do we change this? Well, we have to change this by going into the configuration file, and then we have to change it manually because calculating tax is kind of important, right? So we want this to have an oversight from a programmer, and then if there are new tax rates that are coming from the regulations, we are going to go to these configuration files and change them by hand manually, or sometimes we may have some automatic software that can apply or change these configuration files. That depends on our design of the software. But basically, what we want to do in this piece of software is we want to separate this important information and put in a separate file so that we can easily find, identify, and access these rates. And when we need to change them, we change them in a special way. So that's the purpose of configuration files. And here we have different tax rates for different brackets. For example, the tax rate for bracket first is 0.8. The tax rate for bracket second is 0.78, and that continues. And see that we are using snake name convention, right? So the snake name convention is that we have underscores between each words, and that's how snakes naming convention. And we also use capital letters for all letters, so that's how we understand that these are constants. Here's another example for a configuration file. Now suppose that we are developing software for a university course management system, and we may have certain grade point average constants, and then we place them into a configuration file so that we can easily identify these values within our software design. And when we need to change them, we may go to the configuration file and change them. Now again, we use the similar approach as we did in the previous example. We are making them as final, static final, and then of course they have to be public, otherwise we won't able to reach them from outside the class. And we have the graduation GPA with honors, which is 3.9. We have the graduation GPA, which is 2.0, and so forth. Now, of course, these are constants. How we understand them? Well, they are in capital case, and they use the snake naming convention. Another use for configuration files is actually when we develop systems for different platforms, we may keep certain parameters in configuration files. For example, if we are developing software for a Windows machine, for a Windows platform, and if we develop software, the same software for a Linux machine or Linux platform or a macOS platform, we may have certain different values to configure the system, the platform that we are going to be installing our system. So in those software, we may have configuration files to adjust our software for that particular platform. And not in all configuration files we use constants. Sometimes we may not use them. We may use variables that we keep in the configuration files. But then in that case, we do not protect our variables from modification from outside the class. But when we set them as final and as constants, then we are protecting them from modification from outside this class. And also that depends on what kind of interface we provide with these configuration files. So these are all based on the software design and the needs of the application that you are developing. Here's a simple exercise for you. Create a configuration file consisting of constants for a project that you're developing. And this is the end of this module.